Welcome back to the deep dive. Um, Today, I actually want to start with a scenario that I think, well, you've probably lived through at some point,
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
right? So imagine your office is just on fire.
Mm.
Metaphorically, I hope.
Let's hope.
Yeah. So the servers are down and the client is just screaming on the phone and your visionary boss is frantic, throwing out wild ideas to fix it.
Just adding to the chaos, really.
Exactly. And ideally, you are panicking too. But then you look over at that one desk in the corner.
The eye of the storm.
Right. There is this one person who isn't sweating, they aren't shouting orders, and they definitely aren't looking for a pat on the back. They're just quietly working.
And then 5 minutes later, the server is back up.
Yep, the client has a really calm email in their inbox, and the problem is just gone.
And the funny thing is, nobody quite knows how they did it. People just assume that's just how things work.
Exactly. So today we're talking about that exact person. We are digging into the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report to profile a very specific type.
The SFSN.
All right, the SFSN, which is known as the stable carrier.
This is honestly one of my absolute favorite profiles to analyze, because they are the unsung heroes of the modern world.
They really are.
We love to celebrate the loud leaders and the disruptors who break things, but the SFSN is the person keeping the floor from literally falling out from under everyone else.
And before we get into the nitty-gritty of that, I want to, for those who haven't tuned in before, could you just give us the 10-second elevator pitch on what the Max Energy ME80 system actually is?
Sure.
Because it is not just your standard, are you introverted or extroverted kind of test, is it?
No, it is much more mechanical than that. The ME80 system looks at human personality like an energy circuit.
Okay, an energy circuit.
Right. It doesn't just describe what you do. It actually explains the internal wiring, what they call the energy matrix.
The energy matrix.
Exactly, which dictates how you process information and emotion and decision-making. It is like popping the hood of a car rather than just commenting on the paint job.
I really love that analogy. So today we are popping the hood on the stable carrier. Let's start with their identity. The report uses this great visual metaphor of someone standing low but steady in a storm, quietly carrying the weight for others.
That low part is crucial. In the Max Energy framework, the SFSN habitually places themselves in what is called a rear position.
Now let me stop you there, because especially in Western business culture, rear position sounds like left behind. It sounds kind of passive.
I know.
Like, is this just the person who's afraid to step up and take charge?
That is the single biggest misconception we need to clear up right now. It is absolutely not passivity.
Okay.
Think of a military unit. You have the vanguard charging up the hill and taking bullets and maybe making mistakes. But who ensures the ammo gets there?
The logistics team.
Right. Who ensures there is a retreat path or that the bridge doesn't collapse?
The rear guard. The people making sure the mission is physically possible.
Exactly. The SFSN isn't in the back because they are afraid of the front. They are in the back because they have this hypersensitivity to risk.
Ah, so they are monitoring everything.
Yes. They are monitoring the entire environment. They willingly trade the glory of the spotlight for the safety of the system. Their goal isn't winning in an ego sense. It is sustainable operation.
So while the hero types are sprinting ahead, the SFSN is checking the structural integrity of the road they are running on.
Precisely. Their inner logic basically says, if I stabilize myself, the whole structure stands. If I wobble, everything sways.
Which brings us perfectly to the control mechanism described in the report. There are two terms here that sound a bit like civil engineering to me. Downward rooting and lateral support.
Yeah, they do sound like that.
Can we break that down? Because downward rooting sounds pretty intense.
It's essentially a physics concept applied to psychology. Think about the difference between a firework and a concrete foundation.
Okay.
A firework is what we call upward eruption. It shoots energy up and makes a big noise and looks pretty and then burns out.
And that's definitely not the SFSN.
No, definitely not. The SFSN resolves stress through downward rooting. Instead of shooting energy out, they increase their bearing surface area.
Bearing surface area.
Right. They spread the weight out. They ground themselves.
It is like if you push a skyscraper, it doesn't push back. It just absorbs the wind because its roots go so deep into the ground.
That is exactly it. And that lateral support part means they are naturally looking side to side.
Like looking at their teammates.
Yes. Asking who needs help or where is the gap in the process. They act as the mortar between the bricks to make sure the team stays connected.
I like that image a lot. But I do want to get a little technical for a minute here. Because the ME80 system uses this concept of an energy matrix.
Right, the engine parts.
Yeah, the IPIQ and EQ. I really want to understand how this machine actually runs, because on the surface, it seems like a bit of a contradiction.
It creates a paradox, for sure. Let's start with the IP, which is the inner value layer. For the SFSN, this is defined as stable accumulation activation.
Stable accumulation. That sounds like my retirement fund.
It is actually a perfect analogy. Think of an investor like Warren Buffett.
Well,
Some personality types are day traders. They want quick wins and high volatility and big bursts of dopamine.
high risk, high reward.
Exactly. But the SFSN plays the long game. They deeply believe value comes from consistency, so they accumulate trust and competence and resources over a long period of time.
So they definitely aren't sprinters.
No, they're ultramarathon runners. They don't mind the daily grind. In fact, they actually find security in the grind as long as it is building towards something solid.
Okay, so the engine block is built for endurance. But then I look at the IQ layer, which is the emotional activation layer. And the report defines this as intuition and speed judgment.
Right.
It seems super contradictory to me. We just said they're slow and steady. How can they have speed judgment?
This is the hidden superpower that constantly catches people off guard. We assume stable means slow thinker.
Right, because they are quiet.
Exactly. But remember, their high sensitivity to risk. Their internal radar is spinning at 100 miles per hour.
Ah, so the body is still, but the mind is racing.
Yes. They spot the gap or the risk or the potential failure point way before anyone else does.
So while the marketing team is arguing about the font color on a presentation, the SFSN has already intuitively realized the budget isn't going to last until June.
They see the car crash before the driver even touches the brakes.
That is wild.
It is. But, and this is key, because of that stable accumulation value in their IP layer, they often don't scream about the crash.
What do?
They just quietly adjust the budget. They solve the problem before it ever becomes a thing.
Which perfectly leads into the EQ, the decision calculation layer. The report calls this emotional bearing and stability.
Think of this as the shock absorber of the car. If the IQ is the radar detecting the pothole, the EQ is the suspension system that hits the pothole so smoothly that the passengers don't even spill their coffee.
That sounds like a massive amount of emotional labor.
It is a staggering amount of emotional labor. They act as the emotional ballast for the entire team. When decisions need to be made, they never make them based on the heat of the moment. They calculate everything based on equilibrium. They literally ask, what decision keeps the boat steady right now?
And then finally, there is the manifestation layer, which is how they actually appear to the outside world.
Seamlessness. Impact through pure execution. You know an SFSN is doing their job perfectly when you don't notice anything going wrong.
It is just the complete absence of friction,
Exactly.
which frankly is a blessing and a curse. Because if you do your job perfectly, nobody notices you did anything at all.
We will definitely go to that curse part in a minute. But first, let's look at a very specific inner trait the report highlights called long-term bearing.
Long-term bearing. It sounds like something a ship captain would talk about.
It essentially is. It is all about how they handle critical junctures. The SFSN has this deep compulsion to fill the gaps first before advancing.
Can you give me a real-world example of that? Because filling gaps sounds just a little abstract.
Sure. Imagine a big startup launch. The visionary founder says, we launch on Monday, go, go, go.
And the sales team is super hyped.
Right, everyone is celebrating. But the SFSN is the one staring at the screen thinking, wait, the customer support link on the website goes to a 404 page, and we haven't even set up the billing Stripe account yet.
So everyone else is popping champagne,
Yeah.
and the SFSN is in the back room wiring the electrical plugs.
Correct, and they will stop and fix it. They won't argue about the grand vision. They will just quietly do the actual work to make the vision physically possible.
They conserve fuel to maintain the system.
Yes. They know if they join the panic or the hype, the whole system collapses.
So what looks like silence or even disinterest to an outsider is actually a really heavy lift. They are carrying the weight of the chaos so the visionaries can keep on dreaming.
That is the beauty of it.
But
Here comes the but.
here comes the shadow blind spot. Because every strength has a blind spot. And for the stable carrier, the report identifies a really dangerous one. Boundary blurring.
Oof. Boundary blurring, that sounds like a fast track to burnout. What is the root cause of that? It stems directly from their core principle of not adding trouble. The SFSN desperately wants stability, and conflict creates instability.
Right.
So when someone asks them to do something totally unreasonable or dumps extra work on their desk at 5 p.m. on a Friday,
They just freeze?
they calculate. They think, if I refuse this, it creates a conflict, a bump in the road.
Yeah.
It is just easier for the system if I stay quiet and do it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
They overestimate the cost of refusal.
Yeah.
They genuinely think saying no will cause a complete disaster.
Exactly. They constantly accommodate others to keep the peace. The report has this incredibly heavy phrase for it. It says fatigue accumulates in the dark.
Wow. Fatigue accumulates in the dark.
Yeah.
That hits really hard.
Yeah.
So they aren't complaining at the water cooler with everyone else.
No, because complaining is unstable behavior, so they internalize it all. They burn out completely silently.
And the danger there is because they prioritize harmony, they don't express their disagreement in the moment, so it just festers. I can totally see that happening. And then like 6 months later, they explode over something incredibly small, like someone moving their stapler.
Or worse, they don't explode, they just shut down completely. They become deeply resentful. The report notes that when they finally do need to speak out, they often hesitate anxiously instead of just communicating clearly.
Because they have basically trained people to treat them as a doormat, and then they suffer the consequences of it.
Right, and this bleeds directly into their social relationships too.
How does the report define their social style?
It calls it low-key support. The SFSN isn't winning you over with massive charisma. They are never the life of the party.
Okay.
They build trust through continuous presence. They are just always there.
They're the friend you call when you need help moving a couch, not the friend you call to go clubbing at midnight.
Exactly. They are warm and patient and incredibly dependable. But there is an invisible risk here.
Which is?
Because they are so smooth and accommodating, everyone just assumes they are always fine.
Oh, don't worry about Sarah. She is a rock. She can handle anything.
And nobody ever checks on the rock. Because rocks don't need checking on, right? So their own emotional needs get delayed, sometimes indefinitely.
That is such a vital takeaway for anyone listening. If you have a rock in your life, you need to check on them. Just because they aren't screaming doesn't mean they aren't being crushed under the weight.
Absolutely. It is so important.
Let's pivot to the professional side before we wrap up today. If I am a CEO or a hiring manager, why do I actively need an SFSN on my team? If they are so low-key and always in the background, aren't they just easy to overlook?
You overlook them at your own peril. The report defines their core business value as stable foundation building. They are the adhesive.
The glue.
The glue that holds the entire strategy together. You can have the best strategy in the world, but without an SFSN to build the processes and buffer the conflicts and ensure the tiny details are correct, it is just a nice PowerPoint presentation.
The report actually makes a pretty bold claim here. It says an organization without SFSNs might grow really fast initially, but it will likely collapse under its own weight.
It is just basic physics. You cannot build a penthouse without a solid basement. The SFSN provides that irreplaceable foundational work.
They translate the wild visionary ideas into actual repeatable processes.
Yes. They catch all the balls that the visionary leaders constantly drop.
So if we are looking for the perfect habitat for a stable carrier where they can really thrive, what fields does the ME80 report recommend?
It points to 4 key areas where their specific energy matrix shines. First is obviously operations and execution support, anywhere that requires a seamless back-office flow.
Keeping the machine well-oiled.
Second is project coordination, especially really complex projects. Since the SFSN hates gaps, they are incredible at ensuring nothing falls through the cracks between different departments.
I imagine they are the only ones who actually read the full documentation on a project.
Somebody has to do it.
Fair enough.
Third is customer relationship maintenance. Now, this is really important. We're not talking about hunter sales, not aggressive cold calling. We mean the farmer role, long-term companionship. Clients absolutely love them because they actually do what they say they're going to do.
They aren't trying to upsell you every 5 minutes. They're just making sure the product works and you are happy.
Exactly. And finally, logistics and stability roles, serving as the organization's ballast.
Ballast. That is the heavy weight in the bottom of a ship that keeps it upright in a severe storm right now. That really is the perfect summary.
It really is. They keep the world from swaying.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to synthesize all this. The SFSN, the stable carrier, is this fascinating mix of high-speed internal intuition and a very low-speed, calm external demeanor.
Yes.
They are the ones rooting downwards so the rest of us can safely reach upward.
That is beautifully put. But we do have to leave you with that warning about the shadow blind spot, the boundary blurring.
Right. So here is the challenge. If you are an SFSN listening to this deep dive right now,
Realize that your stability is your greatest superpower, but you cannot hold up the building if you are crumbling on the inside. Expressing a boundary doesn't mean you are failing at being stable. It actually means you are performing necessary maintenance on the most important part of the system, which is yourself.
and if you work with an SFSN,
Truly see them. Do not take their silence for granted.
I want to leave everyone with a final provocative thought that builds on what we discussed.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of validating the crisis that didn't happen.
No, I love that.
Because in corporate culture and in life, really, we always reward the firefighter who boldly puts out the fire.
Give them medals and promotions.
Exactly. But we rarely reward the fire marshal who did the quiet, boring work to make sure the fire never started in the first place.
The SFSN is that fire marshal.
They are. And when their stability is truly seen and their boundaries are actually respected, they transform from just being the quiet person in the corner to being the absolute most reliable force in any room. But how do we start measuring and rewarding the absence of disaster? That is something I think every leader needs to mull over.
Couldn't have said it better. It completely shifts how you view talent.
This has been an incredibly illuminating look at the backbone of our social and professional lives. I want to remind everyone that the insights from today's deep dive come directly from the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report.
It is such a fascinating system. We really only scratched the surface today. But if you want to understand your own energy matrix or figure out who the stable carriers are on your team, you should definitely look into it.
You can find a lot more information by visiting their official website at www.maxenergylife.com, or you can search on Facebook for Max Energy Nishu or Metanergy.
I highly recommend checking out those resources.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Check on your strong friends, keep your foundations solid, and we will see you on the next one.
Take care, everyone.